Welcome to the Equity Conscious Leader, a new generation equity podcast and YouTube channel where we chat with leaders about tangible system change and strategies to advance and sustain equity work in their organizations. Our conversations dive deep into the 6 dimensions of equity conscious leadership. So how do you lead with transformational system change for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Let's find out on this episode of the Equity Conscious Leader with your host and educational equity leader, Dr. Jag Lathan.
Hello, how are you?
Great, thanks. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for joining today. I know that we're going to learn so much from you, and I look forward to our conversation. So, can you please just share your name and then we'll continue.
Sure. I'm Alison Tedford Seaweed.
Perfect. To get to know you a little better, how did you get started being an author and a storyteller and a consultant?
I think I started writing when I was really little. I remember writing in a journal, and my grandma used to bring me to the neighbor's house for me to read whatever I had written, whether it was poetry or short story. And then as a teenager, one of my teachers gave me the most comedically large notebooks I've ever seen to record my thoughts in. And I moved into a job working with the Canadian federal government. And after about a decade, I was starting to feel like I really needed some creative input. And I started a mommy blog, which is kind of an unlikely place to start, but it really helped me find community and find my voice and got me comfortable writing more. And it just created this pathway to a consulting career. And over the course of my time writing and consulting, I met some really amazing people, and I'm a publisher and went on to publish some books. And I've just had a really exciting journey with sharing the written word in many different ways, of course.
Perfect. Thank you, Alison. Tell me more about just the title of your books.
My most recent book is The Canadian Business Owner's Guide to Reconciliation. And it's around Indigenous inclusion in the workplace. And it addresses how business owners can participate in reconciliation with Indigenous people. That's my most recent title. And I wrote 2 other books, one about inclusion in the workplace and one about chronic pain and entrepreneurship. Outside of the business books, I co-wrote a textbook with a nonprofit in Ontario, and I ghost wrote a memoir for a traveling midwife who had retired and wanted to share her life's journey.
Thank you. So that's so beautiful. We're going to jump right into the Equity Conscious Leadership Framework, which is a framework that New Generation Equity uses to support teams, leaders, organizations transform their systems and to think kind of broader about what equity means, what anti-racism means, how do you really transform your system to do the really important work in organizations. And Dimension 1 is around reconciliation and healing, open hearts and minds for restoration. And it just fits so perfectly with your latest book. And so I would love to know, what's been your journey? Like, how did you get there? What inspired you to write it? And what is it about?
For sure. So when I was about 18 years old, I had a temp job at an office, and it turned out that it was Indian Residential Schools Resolution Canada, which was the Canadian government office responsible for resolving residential school claims. I worked there for 3 years, so it was quite a long assignment. And then I transferred into the Canadian prison system, and I worked there for about 10 years, and I still was working with a lot of intergenerational survivors of residential schools, and even working alongside actual survivors who attended residential schools. And I found that there were so many stories and so much, there was just a strong need for people to understand what happened and how to move on from there. And so it's something that I've shared about a lot on social media. and it tried to be a resource within the business community around this important piece of social history, and an historical relationship with Indigenous people and the Canadian government. And a year ago, 215 unmarked graves were found in Kamloops, British Columbia, and those were related to people who attended the residential school. And members of the business community were reaching out and asking, like, what's our role in all of this? Like, should we say something? What if we say the wrong thing? What should we say? How can we make a difference? What can we do? And so the book really came from those conversations around wanting to create a resource so people could step into whatever role they felt led to occupy in terms of healing, reconciliation, and to be able to better connect with their customers, their employees, and to find out how they can make a difference at this time.
So, Alison, how, for example, are you engaged? So what nation are you a part of, and how did this kind of connection happen? Like, how do people know, like, they could reach out to you about this topic of healing and reconciliation between the business world and Indigenous communities?
I'm a Kwakil First Nation member. My ancestry, my family is Nakota, and we're from kind of the Port Hardy area of British Columbia, so kind of the north of Vancouver Island. And I think people tend to find me because I've been sharing a lot on social media about Indigenous social history, about Indigenous perspectives, and their own inclusion. So I was a natural person for people to reach out to, because I try to create a space where people can ask questions and not feel silly or judged, and to really find ways to connect and share in a way that's productive and hopeful, focusing on moving forward together in a good way.
Thank you. One reason why our framework starts with healing and reconciliation is because we believe that in order for people individually, but also collectively, and organizations to really begin to create liberated systems, we have to contend with the past, right? And I can say in the United States, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the United States, that's not a practice that we've had. And so I was drawn to your work because I thought, wow, this is someone who actually is writing extensively about the importance of healing and reconciliation. I'm going to read a quote here from the framework, and I would love for you to kind of respond and just talk about what's coming up for you when you hear it. Okay?
For sure.
In equity work, reconciliation involves acknowledging how historical and current inequities and power dynamics have harmed those who live on the margins of society. People who have directly benefited from oppressive systems and people who have been recipients of historical oppression. Understanding that through our intersectional identities, we may experience both. Need reconciliation to heal as they work through the harm and pain to repair and create more just systems. This healing-centered approach creates the space to explore collective trauma through a lens of restoring and amplifying our communal well-being. And that is from an author named Jen Wright.
Oh, I love that. I think what we talk a lot about in Canada around truth and reconciliation is that the truth comes first, and that is about recognizing the reality of what happened and speaking into the experiences of people whose perspectives have been excluded from history books, whose narratives have not been privileged in sharing what's happened, and to understand, where everyone's coming from, because you can't move forward if you don't know where you are, right? In order to situate yourself, you need to understand what's taken place and acknowledge and understand what the person that you are connecting with, what their experience has been, and where they have come from. And I think that's about, creating empathy. It's about understanding each other, and really finding ways to move forward. Because if you don't know what the barriers are, you're not going to be able to be helpful. And understand where the barriers are. Like, you have to understand what is happening to create them, what's continuing to maintain them, and what are the things that could make a difference in terms of moving forward. And from the perspective of the people who are experiencing those challenges, because we can look and say, oh, well, I think this might help or that might help, but it's really from the perspective of the person who's experiencing the challenge, because they know what they've tried before and what didn't work, and what other well-intentioned people have done in the past.